All right, here we go. Today is Sunday, January 13th, 2019. Holy crap. This is this is the year of Blade Runner, isn't it?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Well, the original.
Right, the original. Right. And this is episode 231 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Happy New Year, my friend. Hopefully you had a restful and productive New Year break and holiday break of whatever holiday you choose to participate with.
It was a great Festivus. Yep, absolutely. Seriously, though, it was a wonderful break. Hope it was great for you, too. It went by in a flash for a lot of different reasons, but I had a really great time, so thank you.
Indeed. So let me ask the question that everybody's wondering. Why are we so bad at getting shows out?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill everybody, and that's a lot of people to have to go kill.
Not really. 20, 25.
Maybe. I mean, still, but that's like, now you're into the whole serial.
Yeah, and there's travel.
Right.
Paperwork.
Yep.
So really what you're saying is just your day job has been busy.
I've been very, very busy. Actually, I would say that I feel like I've been busier now than I've ever been in my entire career.
Wow.
Notwithstanding the break, during the break, I had family in town. My son was home from college, and we just couldn't make it work. So I apologize. Things I think are slowing down at work a little bit. So look for a hopefully more regular release schedule. And thank you for your patience, everyone.
Indeed.
All right.
But we're here today.
And that's right. Is what counts. And we have some I think pretty great stories. So, but before we get into those, just a reminder that the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and do not represent those of our employers.
But for an adequate fee, they could.
That is also true. Okay, so first up, a story from lifehacker.com. It's not at all an InfoSec story, but I thought it was actually a pretty good InfoSec story. The title here is Why Smart People Make Stupid Decisions. And you actually sent this one over, and I thought it was, it really resonated with me as being someone who makes a lot of stupid decisions. I love how the author characterizes right out of the gate. He says, as you know, when other people make stupid mistakes, it's because they're fundamentally incompetent. But when you make a stupid mistake, it's because of specific circumstances or because someone else is fundamentally incompetent.
Correct.
And that is very, very true for most people. But then he goes on to talk about some causes of making stupid decisions as defined by by somebody named Adam Robinson, who's a chess master.
I want some title with master on the end, but a cool one, not like lame
webmaster.
Yeah, I got to find something that has an official title that is cool, like blade master, or blacksmith master. I don't know.
Master electrician, master plumber.
This could go so badly. I should never have brought this up. Let's just move on.
Right. Master Cyberman.
See?
There you go. All right. Something new.
But, he brings up, and this kind of ties in with the talk I gave recently at DerbyCon about, in part, of social engineering attacks and psychological attacks prey on these sorts of things. And something you and I have talked about a lot of training in InfoSec awareness isn't a silver bullet. It doesn't fix all the problems because people are variable in their performance. And he's talking about here's what sort of things affect good decision making, and has 7 factors.
Yep, and the 7 factors that affect performance in decision making is number 1, being outside of your circle of competence, which
I am all the time, every day. So I'm pretty much screwed.
Well, that's true, and the worst part is that most people don't recognize that they are outside of their circle of competence, which is...
I am so amazing, I recognize it.
Right. Way more than half of people are above average drivers. So, stress is the second factor, which we've talked about in the past. Is that's a contributing factor to why people might mistake a fish. Rushing or urgency against something that a lot of social engineering techs take advantage of. Fixation on an outcome, which is, I think this goes back to the point that you often make, that people are, I guess outside of security, right? People are incented to do a particular function for their company, and that function is not like identifying phishing emails.
Right. It may be reviewing resumes that get sent in.
Right.
Or
publishing payroll or selling products or what have you. There's very, very few people who have the luxury of having a job where they get to identify phishing emails all day. Next one is information overload, and that can obviously manifest itself in lots of ways. I can see that in myself a lot. I will be staring at spreadsheets and kind of get lost, and it's easy to see how that would be a factor. Groupthink or social cohesion, right? So
don't challenge the status quo.
Yeah, everybody else has clicked the email. How come you haven't? Right.
Yeah.
And then finally, being in the presence of an authority, including yourself. Which, by the way, that is like the business email compromise.
Absolutely.
Embodied.
And going back to groupthink or concern for social cohesion, great example of that is allowing somebody to tailgate through a badged door.
Yeah,
is a perfect example of that.
Holding a door open for someone, right?
Right. Being in the presence of an authority figure. Like you said, that's business email compromise in a nutshell. Is somebody's faking being an executive or a leader, somebody with authority over you, and asking you to do X, Y, Z. Exactly.
So, I think the net point of this is, if you want to make better decisions and make fewer mistakes, you have to recognize the factors that will drive some of those poor decisions and mistakes. And honestly, I think a lot of that there's two ways to view that. One is as an individual person, what can you do to recognize these factors in you? But then also from the perspective of a person who's designing a security program, trying to keep an organization safe. These are things that should be designed into processes and security programs to accommodate the fallibility of people under these different circumstances. People are going to be stressed. They are going to have deadlines. They're going to be that you're going to have managers who are overbearing, and somebody's going to try to spoof being one of those managers, and what are you going to do about that, and so on. By the way, I thought this is also interesting because there's two books by a guy named Robert Cialdini. One is called Persuasion, and the other one is called Persuasion, and he actually goes through the different factors of persuasion, and the 7 items here not directly maps, but are very similar in nature to that. And if you're interested in social engineering at all, go read those books. They're fascinating. They'll tell you why. What you should do if you think you're having a heart attack is not to scream that you're having a heart attack. Point at someone and say, "You go call 911."
Sure. Yeah. That's. There's a concept, I will not do it justice, but a group mentality concept, like when something out of normal or dangerous or weird happens. There was an incident in Detroit many, many years ago where a woman was being assaulted on a bridge by a man, very large, much larger than her, and surrounded by spectators. and nobody did anything, and they were trying to figure out why. And it's that sort of there's a term for it that I cannot remember, but that kind of concept of the groupthink. You're waiting for somebody else to take lead or tell you what to do, and it's rare for those, unless they have extensive training, to break out of that and take charge themselves of a situation. So it's we are normally sort of passive in an unknown, unexpected situation because we're waiting for an authority figure. So yeah, that goes to your point. If somebody tells a specific person to do a specific thing, it breaks out of that groupthink. And I know I'm not doing this topic justice with the proper terms, but
yeah, I will tell you that specific situation you just described is actually in one of those books. I forget which one. He talks
good.
about that very very case. So it's a really fascinating. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, but back to this, I mean, one of the things that they don't talk about in the story, but one of the things that I kind of talk about trying to deal with is if it's a really critical decision, don't leave it to chance. Don't leave it to individual human judgment. Have a second pair of eyes validated. Have a process that must be completed. Remove some of the sort of inherent opportunity to make a bad decision by building some sort of cross-check or checklist into that decision making.
Yeah, I was going to say, you pilots have. I mean, that you've kind of embraced that type of challenge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is done via checklist, and you're taught as well something called cockpit resource management, where if you're flying with multiple pilots, everybody has the authority to challenge the situation. If back in the early days of aviation, and you still see this actually in some Asian cultures, the captain of the aircraft is never challenged. Was never challenged. They are the commander of that aircraft, and what they said went, even when other members of the crew saw that they were putting the flight in danger or about to have a fatal incident. The rest of the crew was reluctant to speak up and challenge the captain. So in most Western airlines, and I only say this because it's still a problem in some Eastern cultures because of their cultural makeup, and I cannot think of it. There's a certain term for it. But anyway, in Western culture, they have taught specifically about CRM, where each crew member is checking each other, challenging each other. If something is not going according to what it should, they have the expectation and the authority to challenge that. Now, it still doesn't happen all the time correctly, but that is the concept. So, you translate this back into IT security in an enterprise, you got a very similar situation, right? Where you've got, can you foster an environment where someone can escalate over their boss if something's going drastically wrong without fear of retaliation and condemnation, and and that's a whole other set of problems. But I don't think we've got a good handle on that in the IT world today.
No, certainly not.
To your first point, yes, everything's done via checklist, and even to the point where if you're taught, if you get interrupted during the checklist, start over to make sure you don't miss anything. So,
yep. Well, it's developing those kinds of heuristics to help combat the challenges, I think, make a lot of sense. It's it's difficult to do. I think there's a difficult line to walk between being in an organizational context. Obviously, being in a cockpit of an airplane at 30,000 feet is a different situation, but walking that line of what is the right level of policy and process and checklist and whatnot is a difficult. It's a difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah, because there's a you introduce friction and drag into an organization when you start doing that sort of thing.
Right.
You reduce nimbleness, you reduce flexibility, you reduce speed to execution when you start doing that. But that is sort of the trade-off if you want to find a way to avoid some of these situations where people make mistakes or are being led to make mistakes by bad actors.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on to the next story. This one comes from the Chicago Tribune, and the title here is Tribune Publishing Continues Investigation of Malware Attacks as Some Process is Still Affected. So this happened right at the end of last year, actually right around my birthday, which was an interesting story. Basically the Tribune Publishing. Tribune Publishing is like a network of nationwide newspapers here in the U.S. And apparently, it wasn't the SCADA systems that were impacted. It was apparently the design systems that produce the plates that the machinery that prints the newspaper uses.
Their fancy version of Microsoft Word.
Yeah, Quark Express. I think
whatever it is they're using.
Yeah. So apparently that function was a common resource, a common shared resource across all of these different newspapers, and is to the best of anyone's knowledge now, that environment was infected with the Ryuk malware, and of course everybody was kind of throwing around, oh my God, this was the work of the North Koreans, because of course Ryuk can trace its lineage back to Hermes, and Hermes was some of the malware that the North Koreans used to attack the Far East Investment Bank and other victims in the past. So there's unfortunately not a lot more information about this particular event yet, except that it was there's a lot of recent press that does support the fact, or the assertion that it was the Ryuk malware, but we don't know how it got in and exactly what systems it impacted. But there is another story, and this one comes from Security Week, and the title is, "Was North Korea wrongly accused of ransomware attacks?"
What are you talking about? Attribution is always 100% accurate.
Totally. So this post is kind of points out that in right in the time around and shortly after this the Tribune Publishing news broke, there were lots of think pieces about analyzing the similarity in the code structures between Hermes, which is known to be associated with North Korea, and Ryuk, and you can kind of see, if you look through the call trees, it looks very, very similar. And so the assertion is whoever is perpetrating these attacks probably started with the source code of Hermes, and so not a big logical leap that it would be North Korea. But this article goes on to point out that actually Hermes was available for sale for quite some time on underground markets, the dark web. Sorry, I can't even say that without laughing.
Dun dun dun.
So yeah, Hermes was for sale and sold as a kit. Now the thing about both Hermes and Ryuk is they are different than many of the other types of ransomware, in that they are tailored to an organization. So it requires some amount of intelligence about the victim organization, because you end up hard coding hosts and credentials into the actual malware, and as well, at least that's my understanding. I'm not sure about if that's still the case with Ryuk, but the other point is that with Ryuk, and I think Hermes, the encryption keys are set up and embedded into the binaries. So it's not like kind of garden variety ransomware. They are kind of built on a customer by customer, or a customer by customer, victim by victim basis.
Thank you for calling the ransomware helpline. Your call is important to us. Please hold for the next available representative. That's right. So the point of this article is that it's quite likely, given the nature of these attacks and the fact that Ryuk is seen being delivered by TrickBot, and which is mentioned in this article, but there's other sources that talk about how it's being also delivered by Emotet, right? And Emotet is a
what's the best? I need to come up with a clever name for it, but it's basically, it's the industrialization of attacks. It's trying to infect workstations and then putting access to those workstations up for sale. And so somebody comes along and buys access to Emotet and slams in Ryuk, and away they go. So that does
Your call is very important to us. While you're waiting, common problems of ransomware can be solved by looking at our website. You're screwed by ransomware.com. Please continue to hold.
Have you looked at our knowledge base? Many problems can be solved.
Average wait time is currently 38 days.
So anyhow, attribution is hard, but it's been interesting. There's been quite a lot of, probably not in raw terms, right, percentage-wise, but there's been a lot of notable cases recently with, SamSam and Ryuk lately. With the water company in North Carolina, and the city in Alaska, and Atlanta with SamSam, but kind of a similar type thing. This is these are becoming more common, and I don't know if we're going to continue to see that. There, it's interesting because. Just kind of being in the industry, you kind of, at least I am observing a recent change away from really aggressive ransomware, crypto ransomware, towards pretty aggressive placement of crypto mining.
Right. Well, but I wonder if that's changing because most of the value of those cryptocurrencies have collapsed dramatically from the height. And I wonder how the economics of that work out now, and if they might shift back to ransomware.
Well, so I was having this debate, and I don't know the answer, but I will tell you, this kind of reminds me of game theory, because I wonder if with the declining value of cryptocurrency, the raw, it makes less economical sense for a lot of the big, like the big industrial miners, like in China and some of the Asian countries where they have just giant warehouses of ASICs running, and those things are no longer profitable because you just can't pay for the power based on the current value. So that basically what that means is that the amount of processing power in the in the cryptocurrency network is falling off, which means that you can probably make more money using with miners. So I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't have the answer, but I think there's probably some kind of dynamic going on there.
Yeah, no, that would be interesting to kind of see played out in a research study, but by people smarter than me.
With more time than me. So next is from healthcareitnews.com, and the title is Staff Lapses and IT System Vulnerabilities Are Key Reasons Behind SingHealth Cyber Attack, according to COI report. So back in, I guess it was, let's see, when was this? Yeah, between June and, I was thinking it was 2017, but it was 2018. Between June and early July of 2018, SingHealth's database was breached, and I think about 1.5 million health records were taken. And at the time, there's a whole lot of news about this because the prime minister or the president of Singapore, his specific health records have been queried manually a bunch of times, and as well as all of the data taken. So, and then there was the very controversial step, at least in my view, it was controversial, where they disabled internet access for all their employees, and and so I think at the time we talked about that, they probably had some reasons, but from the outside it kind of looks a little reactionary. This particular article here is a very, very brief summary of a 450-page report, which is absolutely amazing to read. It's really great reading.
Note: Jerry's version of amazing may be different than yours.
Your mileage may vary. Yes. So anyway, in this very long report, they actually go through in excruciating detail all of the findings in the investigation, including hypothesis of exactly how it landed, how the actor moved laterally through the environment and compromised different systems. They discuss in kind of gory detail the failings that let this particular actor maintain persistence. Like there were a lot of, there were quite a number of opportunities for people in IT and security people in this environment to recognize that something was really bad was going on, and the reaction was, oh, well, we keep seeing this particular account trying to log in. We'll just disable that account, right? Not launch an investigation.
Right. They talked early on how there was plenty of evidence in retrospect that wasn't properly recognized by the team.
Right.
That delayed getting the right eyes on the situation to minimize the impact when they had early indicators of compromise. Two of them that I thought were interesting, kind of going back to the psychological aspect of all this. This was early in the event. There was a security incident response manager who was looking into the situation, and they weren't exactly sure what a security incident wasn't, but of interest to me that caught my eye was the security incident response manager delayed reporting because he felt that additional pressure will be put on him and his team once the situation became known to management.
Right.
And the evidence also suggests that the reluctance to escalate the matter may have come from a belief that it would not reflect well in the eyes of the organization if the matter turned out to be a false alarm. That's some bad culture right there in impacting security response.
Yeah,
and I find that interesting.
Absolutely. I don't think that's unusual. And I suspect, by the way, that you're going to see kind of both ends of the spectrum. On the one hand, if you raise a false alarm, you might be penalized, but on the other hand, in some environments, you may be penalized for actually raising. Nobody wants to hear the bad news. Basically, the messenger's going to get shot.
Yeah,
and so I would say that the findings in this report are as much organizational as they are technical, and maybe even more so. It was just an excellent read in terms of again how the actor moves through the environment. They just kind of over the course of several weeks compromised different systems and credentials, and they kept trying to get to this database. Apparently they recognized that the database was there, but they just couldn't find the right credentials until eventually they landed on the right system. They were able to gather the correct credentials, and then they ran like hundreds of different queries. One of the interesting things that I hadn't actually seen before, and it's a little unclear to me, and I think it's unclear to the investigators too, exactly how this went down, but one of the workstations apparently, I think it was the initial workstation, what they called Workstation A, the bad actor apparently installed 2 virtual machines on it, and was performing a lot of their lateral movement and command and control through those 2 virtual machines that he or she installed on this compromised workstation. And then so all that's pretty interesting and whatnot. Eventually, the story is blown, or the actor is uncovered when, after a couple of days, a database administrator recognizes that someone is running all these queries against the database, and then it kind of unravels, and and they take action to kick the bad guy out. And by the way, when I say bad guy, it could also be a bad lady. I don't mean to be sexist there.
And yet you were.
Yeah. Sorry about that. But several days later, they saw. I think it was like a week, maybe 2 weeks later. They saw the actor trying, or at least who they believe is the actor, trying to regain access to the environment through phishing emails of one of the people whose workstation he or she had previously compromised, and that actually is what prompted them to disconnect the internet, right? So because they just didn't have confidence that they knew that they had a kind of a focused adversary targeting them, and they weren't convinced they understood all the things that were happening. So that was their choice, and that's a very interesting decision. You have to this is an interesting mental game to play. Okay, so you have recognized that you've got this bad actor in your environment, and and you've taken action to kick them out, but you know that they're pretty sophisticated, and now you see evidence that they are trying to make concerted efforts to get back in. What are you going to do? Right. And that's in this case, they chose to disconnect the workstations from the internet,
which may be a viable option.
Right.
I guess it all depends.
Right.
In this case, I see some of the logic there. We don't know all the avenues. We don't have control of the situation. We got to stop the bleeding.
Right. Right. So,
yeah.
Anyway, if you're interested in such things, I highly recommend you read the report, or at least sections of the report. There's a lot of a lot of fluff in there, but there's also the detail about the attack is really interesting, and there's a very long write up on recommendations, which are also very good, and probably, by the way, pretty relevant to most organizations. They talk about database access monitoring, for example. All right. So moving on to our next story. This one comes from nextgov.com. And the title is HHS Releases Voluntary Cybersecurity Practices for Health Industry. Again, this is, as the title leads you to believe, it is voluntary, right? But I kind of see this as the first step towards modernizing HIPAA. And I know I'm going to raise the ire of some people, but
wow.
I know
we are going to get some hate mail.
I know, but it's really quite good. I will tell you, they released 2 separate guides, one for small healthcare organizations and then one for medium and large hospital systems, and they kind of read like a mixture of 853 with the CIS Top 20 cybersecurity controls. That's the best way I could characterize them. But they're actually good, right? I mean, it's real meaningful stuff, and both technical controls and process advice. Really, there's only one section in each document that is actually specific to healthcare. The rest of it is kind of like general good practices that the average organization could probably pick up and learn from. So that's good stuff.
Indeed.
And by the way, it's still actually online, even though the HHS website, unlike, by the way, NIST, the HHS website remains online. So if you actually try to go and download the NIST cybersecurity framework, yeah, good luck.
It's ugly.
It's ugly. All right. Next is kind of. I've gotten so many "I told you so"s on this next story.
Have you? Have you now?
I've gotten several. So the title actually this comes from ZDNet, and the title is "Data of 2.4 million Blur password manager users left exposed online."
Yeah.
God darn it.
Look, I'm going to say it up front. I still think password managers are viable, useful, good tools.
Yes.
Yes, it concentrates risks. Yes, it makes things a little, in a worst case scenario, really bad. But I think the likelihood is so much lower of the likelihood of a reused password being popped and used elsewhere. That's just me.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's so I'm of two minds here. On the one hand, I absolutely agree with you. still, and by the way, I still personally use a password manager because I feel very strongly about this. But at the same time, I feel like the company here missed the mark on the risk. Right. So if you read this article, they talk about how it was, it was the email addresses and the hashed password that of their users that were stolen. It wasn't the password stolen or stored in their password vaults that was stolen. Those were not stolen. It was the password that you use to get to into those vaults. And that's where I think the kind of the crux of the issue, or at least my concern, comes in, that if someone is able to recover the passwords out of the hashes that were stolen, they may not have directly, gotten copies of the passwords out of the vaults, but now likely they have access to get into vaults through what looks like otherwise legitimate connections.
Right.
And so two-factor. A lot of these password vaults, by the way, I don't know anything about Blur. So this is actually the first time I've heard about Blur. Don't know anything about them, but I do know that most password vaults will allow you to use two-factor authentication. That's certainly a prudent step, I think.
Yeah, and they actually talk about a little bit in the article how the actual password database themselves was not exposed because they don't hold it. And they actually kind of pat themselves on the back saying, we and I think it was a little dodge on throwing some shade on some of their competitors who do maintain a centralized password database.
So they don't? I guess I misread
stored
that.
passwords.
So they don't?
Let me go back and go find the actual section. Yeah, no, they talk about how the master password hashed and salted was leaked. But why is it hiding? Why? There it is. But they...
So this says the company stressed that no passwords stored inside Blur user accounts were exposed. That's what kind of led me to think that it is like a cloud-based rather than...
Does the company stress that no passwords stored inside Blur user account are exposed? Quote, we do not have access to your most critical unencrypted data, including the usernames and passwords for your stored accounts, your auto-filled credit cards, and so on. As frustrated as we are right now, we are glad that we have taken that approach.
Yeah, well, I equate that to, like, I personally use Dashlane, right? And so Dashlane is a cloud-based service, and my understanding is that all of the passwords that I store in Dashlane services are encrypted with my master password, and so they are they couldn't decrypt my passwords if they wanted to, and I guess maybe incorrectly. You might be right. I read that they're doing a similar type of thing. So in any event, I know that there are some password password programs like the old version 1Password, not the new version,
right? And
KeePass and a few others actually will store them locally.
And if I'm going to be an apologist for that industry, every time an incident like this happens, you got to believe that the other vendors are trying to up their game.
Yes,
you would hope.
Absolutely. I mean, this is kind of like an existential event for that industry, right? So, but anyway, I definitely am still strongly in favor of using password managers. I think the risk to the average person is far greater from using the same password. Look, the best conceivable way would be, other than using two-factor everywhere, would be memorizing some kind of unique password for every service that you use and never writing it down, never typing it anywhere. But that's just not viable. It's not viable, right?
Yeah. And, as we know, I'm sure people are screaming at their podcast playing device, well, two-factor can be hacked too.
Yeah, and by the way, that's a great segue.
That's what I'm here for.
Into our last story, which comes from Ars Technica, and the title here is Iranian Phishers Bypass 2FA Protections Offered by Yahoo Mail and Gmail.
So not only are they out in the boat catching their daily catch, but they're learning to bypass... Wait, wrong Phishers, sorry.
That's right.
My bad. Carry on.
Well, there's the oceans... as the fish die off, they gotta find new ways of living. It's the way it goes,
This show took a turn.
Adaptation. Survival of the fittest, I think. Or something.
Yeah, so anyway, how do they bypass 2FA?
Yeah, so they are they're sending out phishing emails using a link to what it basically amounts to a proxy page that the victim attempts to log into, and as they point out, the page that these people are directed to has a little tickler that alerts, and I actually think there's a more automated way to do this that somebody recently released as a open source tool. But in this particular case, the phishing page had like a 0-byte image on it, or transparent image or something like that alerted the bad guys and ladies that somebody was trying to log in, and they basically the criminals here kind of synchronously tried to log into whatever back-end service the victim was trying to log into, and if the criminal was prompted by Gmail or Yahoo Mail or whatever for a second factor, they would direct the victim to a lookalike page that prompted for the two-factor token, which the victim would dutifully enter, the criminal would receive, in a timely manner, and then would be able to in turn completely log in. So it's a matter
of capturing and replaying it before it expires. Is
Correct.
What it really comes down to.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, at its core, this is a very simple attack. There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing complicated at all here. It's it's kind of the functional equivalent of calling someone up and saying, what's your Gmail username? Okay, now what's your Gmail password? Okay, well, it's asking for a two-factor token. What's that too? And
but I guess the flip side is, if we've taught people that two-factor is really hard to breach, and they use two-factor, would that lower their suspicion? Would that make them lull them into a false sense of security, which makes them more likely to fall for this because they use two-factor, so they're fine?
I actually think you're probably right. I mean, maybe not for everybody, but I suspect that it does. I mean, it's kind of like Brian Krebs wrote a couple of weeks back about how the preponderance of phishing websites now use HTTPS.
Right, but they're secure. My browser told me.
Right, you see the little stupid lock in the upper left-hand corner, like you've all been trained to look for. So yeah, and they go on to point out that really, just about every two-factor, protocol that exists, except one, is very likely to fall for this. Yeah, you could think that even something like RSA Secure ID would be vulnerable to that.
No, you've got plenty. Yeah, sure would. You've got about a, I don't know. I think it's programmable, but about 120-second window.
Right.
Because these tokens got to account for time drift and all sorts of issues. But so I guess the real question is this a novel, interesting attack that is not a real world risk very often? In other words, it's an edge case, and then it's not prevalently seen. That makes us, have to throw everything out. But it's getting a lot of press because this is novel. Or is it going to be widespread? Because if it's an occasionally seen, rarely used attack, I'm not as worried about it.
So that's a great question, and I would say, I think it's going to be much more of a consumer targeted attack, because if you think about it, it's much more difficult, though not impossible. It's much more difficult to route someone in a company through one of your phishing pages, and then capture the token in a manner that allows that's useful to the attacker. Now, the resource would otherwise have to be accessible from the internet. If you have, if you're if you're connecting to internal resources, that second factor may not be very useful to someone who's sitting outside of your network and collecting those credentials. But maybe that is the thing that they're using to get into your VPN system or your whatever.
It's also a high cost attack because you've got to have, it's not easy to pull off. It's not trivial.
True.
At least not yet. So I guess what I'm saying is we got to take a measured approach, right? Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, unless you really don't like the baby, in which case, who am I to judge?
That's right. So they do point out that there is one common and increasingly common kind of two-factor technology that doesn't fall victim to that, and that's the U2F, the universal second factor. Because it's a kind of a two-way authentication. There's the browser that on your computer, or the application on your computer, basically has to talk directly and do a handshake direct with with your USB device or NFC device, and so these pass-through attacks wouldn't work. Now, that's not to say that sometime down the line people find a way, some kind of vulnerability in that system, but for now, this particular type of attack wouldn't work against U2F. For now. So that is the first episode for 2019. Welcome back, everyone. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're here.
That's right.
And hopefully we'll be here more often. But I get it. It's tough when you've got a day job.
That's right.
Like yours, which is insanity.
That's right. Like I said, it should be calming down, I hope. All right. So thank you very much, everyone. Let's see. Just a reminder that, I set up, if you're all interested in experimenting with a new social media platform, go to infosec.exchange. Yes, .exchange is actually a TLD. Can you believe that? That's pretty cool.
Wait, what country is that for, though? I mean, is it like Exchangeistan?
It's one of those exoplanets, I think.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. Let's see. Thank you to our Patreon donors. Thank you very much.
You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm about to be putting those servers that it pays for to good use pretty soon. Let's see. Any conferences or anything notable you want to mention you got coming up?
Not yet. We're just kicking off 2019. Like you, my job's gotten crazy busy, so I don't have as much opportunity to go to conferences as I used to. I'm hoping to fix that this year. We'll see. I don't have any speaking slots coming up or any side projects of note at the moment, but hey, we're just kicking off the year. So
that's right.
We'll see what happens.
For those of you going to ShmooCon, have fun.
Indeed. Stay warm, hopefully.
Yeah, that's right. They got some snow up there. All right. We will talk again. Oh, just before I do that, you can find links to the stories we talked about on our website at www.defensivesecurity.org. You can follow Mr. Callett on Twitter @Lurg. You can follow me on Twitter @MaliciousLink. And with that, we will talk again hopefully next week. Take care.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.